Sign of the Labrys by Margaret St. Clair, 1963. It just so happens that I seem to be reading books that are in the Appendix N for Dungeons and Dragons by Gary Gygax. What's Appendix N? I'm glad you asked. In 1979, Gary Gygax wrote a book to help people run Dungeons and Dragons games. It was called Dungeon Master's Guide. It had a number of appendices, and Appendix N was inspirational and educational reading. Here you can see that list. In my reading for Vintage SF, I've stumbled across some of these authors and books. Looking at the list, I've read Lee Brackett, Frederick Brown, Edgar Rice Burroughs, L. Sprague de Camp, Sterling Lanier, Fritz Leiber, Michael Moorcock, and now on this list, Margaret St. Clair, Sign of the Labrys, Jack Vance, Stanley Weinbaum, and Roger Zelazny. Now, the most glaring absence, perhaps, from my reading is J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit or The Ring trilogy. But getting back to Margaret St. Clair, today I want to talk about Sign of the Labrys, and I'm hoping in the future to read The Shadow People. The reason I want to pick up The Shadow People is that Sign of the Labrys, in my eyes, wasn't very good. I was very disappointed in this one. Let's get into what it was about and perhaps why Gary Gygax lists it as an influence for Dungeons and Dragons. First off, a Labrys is a double axe. In this story, it really is just a symbol. It's not widely used, although it exists. What's it a symbol for? A Wiccan society led by a strong female character named Desponia. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's get into the story itself. It begins in the setting of a post-apocalyptic future. There's been a plague that's wiped out 90% of the people in the world. This plague was released from a lab, at least it seems so, and it's based on yeast. People have fled the cities and dug huge caverns, excavating and creating levels below the earth. Our protagonist is Sam Sewell, and we discover that he is really afraid of other people. Because of the plague, distancing is very important in their society now. And because the population has been decimated, there is room in the caverns that have been built, and there's multiple levels of these caverns and apartments. The plague itself presents itself in two ways. One is a respiratory disease. You can tell by people starting to cough and have trouble breathing. Another form of the plague, though, is neurological. The yeast affects their mind. If they come in contact with this particular strain, they will just fall dead within a couple of hours. Even the underground population is still having trouble containing this plague. Our protagonist Sam Sewell works with a bulldozer, shaping the caverns and burying bodies that are in plastic bags. This is a slow process, but they don't want to come too close to even the plastic bags. Their society is policed by something called the FBI, not the FBI. It seems to be a law organization that was formed around the time of this pandemic. The Y stands for yeast, so we don't know for sure. It doesn't tell us if it's Federal Bureau of Yeast, but that's the idea. They police different levels and seem to be able to infiltrate groups. Sam Sewell, to his dismay, is visited by the FBI. They ask him where Desponia is. Now, Sam is not even close to anybody, and he does not know who Desponia is. Slowly, though, he gets dragged into a mystery where he does search for Desponia. Who is she? Why is she so important to the FBI? Eventually, we follow Sam through different levels of these caverns in search of Desponia. Now, if you plan to read this novel, I don't want to get too much more into the plot. But I think you can see with these caverns and these levels and degrees of difficulties in passing through to different levels that this is a major influence on Dungeons and Dragons, the dungeons that we speak of. So we have a post-apocalyptic future started by a pandemic, an authoritarian police force, dungeons, and the Wiccan religion. What I found interesting here is that the Wiccan quality here really seems to be something that could have been replaced by psionics, or if it was more into mythology, oracles. But in a little bit of research, I discovered that the double-edged axe, the Labrys, is a symbology embraced by Wiccans. And there's a particular feminist quality to this symbol as well. Now, the part of the plot that I described to you is actually the most interesting part. The journey itself, the quest, discovering who Desponia is, the ups and downs of the story as he starts to relate to people, and even with the help of drugs or spells, gets close to people. But this quest is rather chaotic, and the relationships seem to be really forced, and there seems to be coincidences in terms of relations. And then for the last third of the novel, it seems like it's almost pointless. So I enjoyed the first third of this novel, but then it really seemed a bit convoluted. I mean convoluted not in I didn't understand what was going on, but the relationship with the FBI, with Desponia, with other characters that are introduced. There really seemed to be random plot points. And the conclusion itself was rather pedestrian, I would say. I can understand why it was an influence for Gary Gygax, just in the setting itself. But as a read, I didn't have a good time. Thankfully, it was only 140 pages. Before I give my final rating, I want to point out something which is kind of bizarre about the copy that I have here. On the back, normally you would have a description of the novel itself. Listen to this description. This is from 1963. Women are writing science fiction. Original, brilliant, dazzling. Women are closer to the primitive than men. They are conscious of the moon poles, the earth tides. They possess a buried memory of humankind's obscure and ancient past, which can emerge to uniquely color and flavor a novel. Such a woman is Margaret St. Clair, author of this novel. Such a novel is this, Sign of the Labrys, the story of a doomed world of the future, saved by recourse to ageless, immemorial rights. Fresh, imaginative, inventive, and perhaps sexist. I give Sign of the Labrys 3 out of 10. 1 to skip. I know I'm going to let this book move on from my library. If you had a different experience with this book, I'd love to hear about it. So if you have anything to say about Appendix N or Sign of the Labrys, or perhaps even about Margaret St. Clair, please comment below. Until next time, keep reading.